I'll double your pay if you solve this, mocked the billionaire CEO to the black cleaning lady. The fluorescent lights hummed their eternal song through the 42nd floor of Virion Systems, casting harsh shadows across the polished marble that reflected Janelle Rivers' tired face. At 11:47 p.m., the billion-dollar AI company's headquarters felt like a ghost ship floating through the Seattle skyline, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of a city that never truly slept. Janelle pushed her cleaning cart down the executive corridor, her rubber-soled shoes squeaking softly against the spotless floor. The sound echoed in the emptiness, a lonely rhythm that had become the soundtrack to her nights for the past 3 years. She'd learned to find comfort in the silence, in the way the building breathed differently after the last executive had driven away in their Tesla or Porsche, leaving behind only the faint scent of expensive cologne and the residue of decisions that moved millions. The executive floor was her final stop each night, a sterile wonderland of glass offices and abstract art that cost more than most people made in a year. As she approached the corner office, the nameplate caught the light. Darren Crowley, Chief Executive Officer. Even in the dim hallway lighting, the gold lettering seemed to gleam with an arrogance that matched its owner. Janelle had cleaned Crowley's office hundreds of times, but she'd only seen the man himself a handful of occasions. He was the type who looked through people like her, as if cleaning staff were simply another piece of automated equipment that appeared and disappeared without conscious thought. Tonight, like most nights, his office was a testament to controlled chaos. Coffee cups with rings staining important-looking documents, protein bar wrappers scattered across his desk, and his trash bin overflowing with crumpled papers. She began her routine, methodically wiping down surfaces and organizing the mess that seemed to regenerate itself daily. It was when she lifted the heavy glass trash bin that something caught her eye. Among the usual debris of a tech executive's life, energy drink cans, takeout containers, and torn envelopes, were dozens of crumpled printouts covered in numbers, graphs, and red ink. Janelle paused, her latex gloves gripping the edge of the bin. She'd seen these printouts before, scattered across Crowley's desk during her cleaning rounds, but tonight something was different. The red circles and arrows weren't random scribbles of frustration, they formed a pattern. Her eyes traced the markings, and a familiar tingle ran down her spine, the same sensation she used to get in Professor Martinez's advanced calculus class when a particularly elegant problem revealed its hidden structure. Without fully understanding why, she found herself smoothing out one of the crumpled sheets against the edge of the desk. The header read, Virion AI Simulation 5B Iteration 847, and beneath it sprawled columns of data that most people would see as meaningless numbers. But Janelle's mind, despite years of deliberate suppression, began to automatically organize the information into patterns. The data streams weren't random. They followed a sequence, a flawed sequence, that reminded her of something from her past life, a life she'd buried beneath years of night shifts and sacrifice. Her hands trembled slightly as memories threatened to surface. Late nights in the university library, the thrill of solving complex equations, the way mathematics had once made perfect sense when nothing else in her world did. Not now, she whispered to herself, crumpling the paper back up and dropping it into her cleaning bag. But even as she tried to push the thoughts away, her mind kept circling back to those red markings, to the pattern that felt like a math puzzle crying out for solution. As she moved through the rest of her cleaning routine, vacuuming the Persian rug, dusting the awards that lined Crowley's ego wall, cleaning the fingerprints from his massive monitor, Janelle's thoughts kept drifting to her younger siblings sleeping safely in their small apartment across town. Marcus, now 16 and captain of his debate team. Keisha, 14 and already showing promise in her art classes. And little David, barely 10 but reading at a high school level. They were her world, her responsibility, her reason for being here instead of somewhere else. The somewhere else haunted her most nights, especially during the quiet hours when the building felt like a mausoleum of abandoned dreams. She'd been 20 years old once, young enough to believe that brilliance was enough, that mathematics could be her ticket to changing the world. The full scholarship to MIT had been her golden ticket, a chance to escape the cycle of poverty that had defined her family for generations. But then came the phone call that changed everything. Her mother's sudden heart attack, the medical bills, and the crushing realization that her 3 younger siblings had no one else. The choice had been simple, really, even if it felt like dying: drop out, come home, and become the parent they needed. Now, at 28, Janelle had perfected the art of not thinking about the life she'd given up. She'd learned to find satisfaction in honest work, in the steady paycheck that kept food on the table and her siblings in good schools. She'd become an expert at silencing the part of her mind that still saw patterns in everything, that still yearned to solve the kinds of problems that made other people's heads spin. But tonight, as she finished cleaning Crowley's office and prepared to move on to the conference rooms, that familiar hunger stirred inside her chest. The crumpled printout in her cleaning bag seemed to pulse with possibility, and despite every rational thought telling her to leave it alone, she knew she'd be taking it home. The security guard's footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor, his flashlight beam dancing across the walls as he made his rounds. Janelle quickly finished her work, gathered her supplies, and pushed her cart toward the service elevator. But as the doors closed and began their descent to the parking garage, she couldn't shake the feeling that tonight was different. In her bag, among the day's collection of forgotten papers and discarded dreams, lay a puzzle that would change everything. The ride home on the 47 bus was always the same, a 40-minute journey through Seattle's sleeping neighborhoods, past closed coffee shops and darkened office buildings, carrying the weight of other people's discarded dreams in her cleaning bag. But tonight, Janelle's fingers kept finding the crumpled printout, tracing its edges through the canvas material like a rosary bead worn smooth by desperate prayer. Her small apartment in Beacon Hill was quiet when she arrived, the only sound coming from the ancient radiator that clanked and wheezed through the night. She peeked into each bedroom. Marcus sprawled across his twin bed with his debate notes scattered around him like fallen leaves, Keisha curled up with her sketchbook still clutched against her chest, and David sleeping peacefully with a mathematics textbook, her old one, serving as his pillow. The sight of that textbook hit her like a punch to the chest. Advanced Calculus and Mathematical Theory, by Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the same book that had once been her Bible, now helping her baby brother dream of equations she'd once solved in her sleep. In the kitchen, under the weak light of a fluorescent bulb that needed replacing, Janelle spread the crumpled printout across the small table where they ate breakfast each morning. The numbers and graphs stared back at her, and suddenly she was 20 again, sitting in the MIT library at 2 a.m., surrounded by empty coffee cups and the electric excitement of a problem that was almost solved. Professor Martinez's voice echoed in her memory. "Mathematics doesn't lie, Miss Rivers. When you find the pattern, trust it. Your instincts are remarkably sharp." She closed her eyes, letting the memories wash over her like a flood she'd spent years holding back. She'd been the first in her family to attend college, riding a full scholarship that covered everything from tuition to textbooks. Applied mathematics with a focus on algorithm design, it had felt like finding her native language after years of speaking in translation. Her professors had whispered about PhD programs, about research opportunities, about a future that stretched out bright and limitless. "You have a gift," Dr. Jennifer Walsh had told her during office hours. "The way you see patterns, the intuitive leaps you make, it's rare. We want to fast-track you into our graduate program." That gift had made her feel invincible, like she could decode the universe one equation at a time. She'd been working on neural network optimization, creating mathematical models that could streamline AI decision-making processes. Her junior year thesis on recursive logic patterns in machine learning had been so innovative that 2 professors had asked to include her in their published research. Then came March 15th, a date burned into her memory like a brand. The phone call from the hospital, her mother's voice weak and frightened. "Janelle, baby, something's wrong. My chest hurts and I can't catch my breath." The heart attack had been massive and sudden. Her mother, only 43 years old, had been gone before Janelle could catch the red-eye flight home. Standing in that sterile hospital room, holding her mother's still warm hand while her siblings sobbed in the corner, mathematics had felt utterly useless for the first time in her life. What good were elegant equations when they couldn't solve the problem of 3 orphaned children and a mountain of medical debt? The choice had been brutal in its simplicity: abandon her education and dreams to keep her family together, or let the state separate them into different foster homes. Marcus had been 13 then, angry and scared. Keisha was 11, still believing their mother might walk through the door. David was just 7, too young to understand why everyone was crying. "I'll take care of you," she promised them in that hospital room, not knowing that those 5 words would reshape the trajectory of her entire life. Now, 8 years later, she traced her finger across the printout's data streams, and her buried mathematical mind began to hum with recognition. The pattern was there, clear as day once you knew how to look. It was a recursive loop error, the kind of fundamental flaw that could cripple an entire AI system if left unchecked. From her bedroom closet, behind boxes of old clothes and forgotten memorabilia, she pulled out a cardboard box labeled MIT. Inside, wrapped in a faded MIT sweatshirt, were her old notebooks, hundreds of pages covered in her neat handwriting, mathematical proofs and algorithmic designs that had once represented her future. Her fingers found the notebook labeled Neural Network Models Junior Year, and she flipped through pages until she found what she was looking for, her original model for optimizing AI decision trees. It was elegant, efficient, and exactly what Virion's flawed algorithm needed. Working by lamplight while her family slept, Janelle fed the printout's data into her old model. The solution materialized with crystalline clarity, a simple reordering of priorities that would eliminate the recursive errors plaguing their system. For the first time in 8 years, Janelle Rivers smiled the smile of someone who remembered what it felt like to be brilliant. The opportunity came 3 nights later, during what Janelle had come to think of as the liminal hour, that strange time around 6 a.m. when the night shift's cleaning crew overlapped with the early morning executives who arrived before dawn to check Asian markets and attend overseas video calls. Janelle was emptying waste baskets in the main conference room when she heard voices echoing from the adjoining break room. Through the frosted glass partition, she could see silhouettes moving around the premium coffee machine that cost more than her monthly rent. The voices were familiar. She'd heard them during her cleaning rounds, discussing million-dollar deals and stock options with the casual indifference of people who never counted coins for bus fare. "The simulation's still crashing," came a frustrated voice she recognized as Dr. Sarah Chin, Virion's chief technology officer. "We're on iteration 852 now, and we keep hitting the same wall. The board meeting's in 2 days, and we've got nothing to show them except failure. Maybe we need to scrap the whole project," suggested another voice, Tom Bradley from the engineering department. "Start fresh with a different approach. With 18 months and $47 million already invested?" The third voice belonged to Darren Crowley, and even through the glass, Janelle could hear the steel in his tone. "Absolutely not. There has to be a logical explanation for why the algorithm keeps failing. We're missing something obvious." Janelle's hands stilled on the trash bin. For 3 days, she'd been carrying the weight of her discovery, unsure what to do with knowledge that felt too big for her circumstances. She'd refined her solution, tested it against different variables using her old mathematical models, and every time she reached the same conclusion: Virion's AI was failing because of a fundamental recursive logic error that could be fixed with a relatively simple reordering of priorities. The ethical weight of staying silent had been growing heavier each night. $47 million, 18 months of work, potentially hundreds of jobs, all hanging in the balance because of a problem she could solve. But what was a night shift cleaning lady supposed to do with that kind of information? Before she could lose her nerve, Janelle found herself moving toward the break room. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pushed open the glass door, the expensive coffee machine's grinding noise covering the sound of her entrance. 3 faces turned toward her. Dr. Chen with her perfectly styled silver hair and designer glasses, Tom Bradley clutching a ceramic mug that probably cost more than Janelle's weekly groceries, and Darren Crowley himself, impeccably dressed even at this ungodly hour, his pale blue eyes taking in her cleaning uniform with undisguised irritation. "Excuse me," Crowley said, his tone suggesting she'd interrupted something far more important than she could possibly understand. "The cleaning crew isn't supposed to be in here during executive hours." Janelle's mouth went dry. but she forced herself to speak. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Crowley, but I couldn't help overhearing about your simulation problems." Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly, and Tom Bradley looked genuinely confused, as if a piece of furniture had suddenly started talking. But Crowley's expression shifted to something between amusement and annoyance. "Oh, really?" he said, setting down his coffee cup with deliberate precision. "And what exactly do you think you know about our simulation problems?" "I've been seeing the printouts in the trash," Janelle said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The ones with the red circles. I think I might know what's wrong." The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Chen blinked rapidly, as if trying to process what she just heard. Tom Bradley's mouth fell slightly open. But Crowley's reaction was far worse. He began to laugh. It started as a chuckle, low and condescending, but it grew into something sharper, more cutting. The sound filled the break room like breaking glass, and Janelle felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. "You," Crowley said, his voice dripping with disbelief and cruel amusement. "You think you've found the problem that's stumped our entire engineering department? Our team of MIT and Stanford graduates with PhDs in computer science and advanced mathematics?" Dr. Chen shifted uncomfortably, and Tom Bradley stared into his coffee as if it might offer him an escape route. But Crowley was just getting started. "Let me get this straight," he continued, his smile sharp enough to cut. "You're a cleaning lady who empties our trash cans, and you believe you've cracked the code on a $47 million AI project that's been our top priority for 18 months? Each word landed like a physical blow, and Janelle felt herself shrinking under his gaze. This had been a mistake, a massive, humiliating mistake. She should have stayed silent, should have minded her own business, should have remembered her place in the carefully constructed hierarchy of this gleaming tower. But then Crowley's expression shifted to something that looked almost gleeful, like a cat that had cornered a particularly amusing mouse. "Tell you what," he said, crossing his arms and leaning against the counter. "I'm feeling generous this morning. If you can actually solve our little problem, if you can do what our entire engineering team hasn't been able to accomplish, I'll double your pay. Hell, I'll even name the patch after you. The Janelle Rivers Memorial Bug Fix." Dr. Chen made a soft sound of protest, but Crowley held up a hand to silence her. "What do you say? Think you can handle that challenge?" His words were meant to be the final insult, the crushing blow that would send her scurrying back to her mop and vacuum. They were sharp, cruel, and designed to remind her exactly where she belonged in his world. But what Darren Crowley didn't realize, what none of them could possibly know, was that Janelle Rivers had already solved their problem 3 nights ago. She just had to figure out how to prove it. The humiliation followed Janelle home like a shadow, settling into her bones as she sat at the small kitchen table where her family ate cereal each morning and where she now spread out her old MIT notebooks under the harsh fluorescent light. Crowley's laughter still echoed in her ears, each remembered chuckle a fresh reminder of how small he'd made her feel in that pristine break room. But underneath the shame burned something else, something that had been dormant for 8 years and was now blazing to life with uncomfortable intensity. It was the same fire that had driven her through countless late nights in the MIT library, the relentless hunger to prove that a problem could be solved, that chaos could be transformed into elegant order. Marcus found her there at 2 a.m., hunched over mathematical equations with David's laptop, the family's only computer, glowing beside stacks of handwritten notes. "Janelle?" His voice was thick with sleep and concern. "What are you doing up?" She looked up at her 16-year-old brother, seeing their mother's eyes in his worried expression. Marcus had grown tall and serious over the years, carrying responsibilities that should have belonged to adults. He'd learned early not to ask for things they couldn't afford, not to complain about hand-me-down clothes or the fact that family vacations existed only in other people's stories. "Just working on something," she said, closing the notebook reflexively. "Go back to bed, baby. You've got school tomorrow." But Marcus didn't move. Instead, he slid into the chair across from her, his gaze taking in the mathematical symbols covering every available surface. "This looks like the stuff you used to do. Before. The word hung between them, heavy with everything it contained, before their mother died, before Janelle sacrificed her future, before their family learned to measure dreams in smaller increments. "Someone at work challenged me to solve a problem," she said quietly. "I don't think he expected me to try." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the lamplight. "Mom used to say you could solve anything if you put your mind to it. She said you had the kind of brain that only came along once in a generation." The memory hit Janelle like a physical blow. Their mother, exhausted from working double shifts at the diner, helping Janelle with calculus homework at this very table, pride shining in her tired eyes as she watched her daughter work through problems that might as well have been written in ancient Greek. "Maybe I did once," Janelle whispered. "But that was a long time ago." "Was it though?" Marcus asked, gesturing toward the notebooks. "Because it looks like you still know how to do this stuff." After he went back to bed, Janelle stared at the laptop screen for a long time, her cursor blinking in the empty document where she'd been transcribing her solution. The mathematical proof was elegant in its simplicity, a reordering of the AI's decision tree that would eliminate the recursive loops causing the system failures. She'd verified it 6 different ways, checked it against every variable she could think of, and each time the solution held. But how could a cleaning lady submit a fix to one of the most sophisticated tech companies in the world without revealing her identity? How could she prove she was right without opening herself up to more humiliation, or worse, accusations of corporate espionage? The answer came to her as she remembered Dr. Chen mentioning the employee suggestion portal during a phone call she'd overheard while cleaning. Virion had implemented an anonymous feedback system 2 years ago, encouraging innovation from all levels of the company. Most submissions were mundane, suggestions for better coffee in the break rooms or requests for standing desks. But there was no rule saying cleaning staff couldn't submit technical solutions. Working methodically, Janelle transcribed her mathematical proof into clean code, structuring it as a series of algorithmic adjustments that any competent programmer could implement. She kept the language technical but accessible, avoiding the kind of advanced theoretical framework that might immediately identify her educational background. At 4:47 a.m., with the first hints of dawn creeping through her kitchen window, she submitted her solution through the anonymous portal. Her message was brief and deliberately casual. "Try this with simulation 5B's base variables. Might fix your recursive loop issue." She attached the code and hit submit before she could lose her nerve. The rest of her day passed in a blur of routine, getting the kids ready for school, catching a few hours of restless sleep, preparing for another night shift. But underneath the familiar rhythms of her life, anxiety churned like a living thing in her stomach. What if she was wrong? What if her solution made things worse? What if they traced the submission back to her? It wasn't until the following evening, as she pushed her cleaning cart onto the 42nd floor, that she realized something had changed. The executive corridor was buzzing with activity despite the late hour. Conference room lights blazed, and she could hear voices raised in excitement rather than frustration. "It's working," she heard Dr. Chen say as Janelle passed the main conference room. "For the first time in 6 months, we have a clean run with 0 crashes. The efficiency improvement is remarkable," came Tom Bradley's voice. "Whoever sent this is a genius. The solution is so elegant. Why didn't we think of this months ago?" Janelle's hands trembled as she gripped her cleaning cart. Through the glass walls, she could see a dozen engineers clustered around computer screens, their faces illuminated by the green glow of successfully running code. Her code. Her solution. For 8 years, she'd convinced herself that her mathematical gifts were a relic of a past life, irrelevant to the practical realities of raising 3 children on a cleaning lady's salary. But standing in that hallway, watching brilliant minds celebrate the implementation of her work, Janelle Rivers remembered what it felt like to be exceptional. The question now was whether she'd have the courage to claim it. The room, as Virion's main conference space was unofficially known, hummed with an energy Janelle had never witnessed during her cleaning rounds. Through the glass walls, she could see at least 15 people gathered around the massive table, laptops open, multiple monitors displaying streams of code and data that pulsed with the steady rhythm of success. It was 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, well past normal business hours, but the executive floor buzzed like a hive in full production. Word had spread through the company about the miraculous fix, and it seemed like half the engineering department had stayed late to witness the AI running smoothly for the first time in months. Janelle tried to focus on her routine, emptying trash bins, wiping down surfaces, pretending that the excited voices weren't discussing her work, but her hands shook every time she heard someone praise the elegant solution, or wonder about the mysterious genius who'd submitted it. "Ladies and gentlemen," came Darren Crowley's booming voice as he strode into the conference room like a conquering general. Even through the glass, Janelle could see his confident smile, the way he commanded attention simply by existing in a space. "I want to personally congratulate everyone on this breakthrough. 18 months of hard work have finally paid off." Janelle paused in her cleaning, a sick feeling settling in her stomach. Through the transparent walls, she watched Crowley position himself at the head of the table, basking in the admiration of his team. "The board meeting tomorrow is going to be spectacular," he continued, gesturing toward the monitors displaying her successfully running code. "We'll announce that Virion has solved the recursive loop problem that's been plaguing AI development across the industry. This puts us months ahead of our competitors." "Sir?" A quiet voice interrupted from the far end of the table. Janelle recognized the speaker, Jenny Kim, a junior engineer who often worked late and always nodded politely when Janelle cleaned around her desk. "I need to clarify something." Crowley's smile faltered slightly. "What's that, Kim?" "This solution," Jenny said, her voice growing stronger. "It didn't come from our team. Someone submitted it anonymously through the employee portal 2 days ago." The room fell silent. Crowley's expression shifted from confident to confused to something that looked dangerously close to anger. "What do you mean, anonymously?" "I mean it wasn't developed by anyone in this room," Jenny continued, her laptop screen reflecting off her glasses as she pulled up the submission record. "The code was uploaded at 4:47 a.m. on Sunday morning through the anonymous suggestion system. Whoever sent it attached a note saying to try it with simulation 5B's base variables." Dr. Chen leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "Can we trace the IP address?" "Already did," said Tom Bradley, typing rapidly on his laptop. "It's interesting. The submission came from the building's internal network, but from a workstation that's registered too." He paused, double-checking his screen. "Janitorial services. Specifically, it was logged in during the night shift on Sunday." The silence that followed was deafening. Janelle felt the blood drain from her face as 24 pairs of eyes turned toward the glass walls, searching for answers in the sterile hallway where she stood frozen with a trash bag in her hands. Crowley's face had gone from confused to furious. "Janitorial services? That's impossible. Check again." "I've checked 3 times, Tom said quietly. "The timestamp and IP address are definitive." "Are you telling me," Crowley said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "that someone on the cleaning crew somehow solved a problem that stumped our entire engineering department?" Janelle's instinct was to run, to abandon her cart, and disappear into the service elevator before anyone connected the dots. But she found herself unable to move, watching through the glass as Crowley's gaze swept the hallway and landed directly on her. Recognition dawned in his eyes like a terrible sunrise. "You," he said, pointing directly at her through the glass. "The cleaning lady from the break room. Get in here. Now." Every face in the conference room turned toward her. Janelle felt like a deer caught in headlights, paralyzed by the sudden, overwhelming attention. But there was no escape now. She set down her trash bag and walked through the conference room doors on legs that felt like rubber. "Did you submit code to our employee portal?" Crowley demanded without preamble. Janelle's throat felt like sandpaper. "Yes." "How?" Dr. Chen asked, her voice gentle but incredulous. "How could you possibly understand our algorithm well enough to fix it?" Instead of answering with words, Janelle walked to the whiteboard that covered one wall of the conference room. Her hands trembling slightly, she picked up a blue marker and began to write. What emerged on that pristine white surface was pure mathematical poetry, elegant equations that flowed into each other like verses in a song only she knew how to sing. She drew the recursive loops that were crippling their AI, showed exactly where the logic broke down, and then demonstrated how a simple reordering of priorities could eliminate the problem entirely. As she wrote, the room grew quieter and quieter until the only sound was the squeak of marker against whiteboard and the gentle hum of the building's ventilation system. When she finished, Janelle stepped back and faced the room full of some of the most brilliant minds in the tech industry. Every single one of them was staring at the whiteboard with expressions ranging from awe to disbelief. "That's," Dr. Chen whispered. "That's absolutely brilliant." Tom Bradley leaned forward, studying the equations. "The mathematical framework is flawless. I've never seen recursive loop optimization explained so clearly." But it was Jenny Kim who asked the question everyone was thinking. "Who are you?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and for a moment, Janelle felt the weight of 8 years pressing down on her shoulders. 8 years of hiding, of diminishing herself, of pretending that brilliance was a luxury she couldn't afford. "My name is Janelle Rivers," she said quietly, her voice gaining strength with each word. "I was a junior at MIT, studying applied mathematics with a focus on algorithm design, before I had to drop out to raise my siblings." Dr. Chen's sharp intake of breath was audible across the room. Tom Bradley blinked rapidly, as if trying to process this information. But it was Jenny Kim who spoke first, her voice filled with something that sounded like reverence. "You're self-taught in AI optimization?" "Not exactly," Janelle replied, moving back to the whiteboard. "I was working on neural network efficiency models during my junior year. My thesis advisor thought the work was promising enough for graduate-level research." She gestured toward the equations she'd written. "This is essentially an evolved version of models I developed 7 years ago." The silence that followed was broken by Crowley clearing his throat loudly. His face had shifted through several expressions: surprise, embarrassment, and now something that looked like damage control. "Well," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "this is certainly unexpected. And we appreciate your initiative, Miss Rivers. I think a small bonus would be appropriate for your contribution. Say, $1,000? The offer landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Dr. Chen's eyebrows shot up, and several engineers exchanged glances that clearly communicated their thoughts about Crowley's insulting proposal. $1,000? Tom Bradley repeated slowly. "Darren, her solution just saved us months of development time and potentially millions in project costs. And prevented us from having to scrap an 18-month, $47 million initiative," added Dr. Chen, her tone carefully neutral but her meaning crystal clear. Before Crowley could respond, the conference room door opened and Margaret Thornfield, Virion's chief operating officer, walked in with 3 other board members behind her. Janelle had seen them occasionally during late-night meetings, but never this close. Thornfield was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded immediate attention. "I apologize for the intrusion," Thornfield said, her gaze sweeping the room before landing on the whiteboard covered in Janelle's equations. "But word of our breakthrough has reached the board, and we wanted to see the solution for ourselves." She studied the mathematical proof for a long moment, her expression growing more impressed with each passing second. "This is extraordinary work. Who's responsible?" The room fell silent again. Crowley opened his mouth, but Dr. Chen spoke first. "This is Janelle Rivers," she said, gesturing toward Janelle. "She identified the recursive loop error and developed the fix that's currently running in our system." Thornfield's gaze shifted to Janelle, taking in her cleaning uniform with an expression that somehow managed to be both surprised and calculating. "Miss Rivers, I understand you work in our facilities department?" "Janitorial services," Janelle confirmed, her chin lifting slightly. "Night shift. And you have a background in mathematics?" "Some college," Janelle said simply. Thornfield nodded slowly, then turned to face Crowley. "Darren, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" The whispered conversation that followed lasted less than 3 minutes, but Janelle could see Crowley's expression growing increasingly uncomfortable as Thornfield spoke in urgent, clipped tones. When they finished, Thornfield returned to the group with a smile that was both warm and businesslike. "Miss Rivers," she said, "Virion Systems would like to offer you a position as lead algorithm consultant in our AI development division, effective immediately. The salary is $240,000 annually, plus stock options and full benefits. Additionally, you'll receive retroactive credit for the patch currently saving our simulation, including your name on all related patents and publications." The room erupted in murmurs of approval and scattered applause. Janelle felt the world tilt slightly, as if gravity had suddenly changed direction. "Furthermore," Thornfield continued, "we'd like to establish a continuing education fund to support your return to school, should you choose to complete your degree. Part-time arrangements are certainly negotiable." 6 months later, Janelle walked through the same executive corridor, but everything had changed. Her business suit replaced the cleaning uniform, her MIT acceptance letter for part-time graduate studies tucked safely in her briefcase alongside the proposal for Virion's new STEM mentorship program for underrepresented youth. As she headed toward her first quarterly review meeting as lead algorithm consultant, she passed the same corner office, now hers, and noticed the small trash bin beside her desk. It was empty. Behind her, she could hear the excited voices of 3 teenage interns she'd personally recruited from local high schools, their animated discussion about machine learning algorithms echoing through the corridor. Marcus was one of them, having earned his spot through a competitive program Janelle had helped design. She smiled, remembering her mother's words, "Some gifts are too important to stay buried forever." At 28, Janelle Rivers had finally learned that brilliance isn't diminished by circumstance. It's only waiting for the right moment to shine.